The ocean was a sheet of black glass, stretching endless under a moonless sky. From below, the silhouette of the MS Ocean Gala loomed like a steel beast, its lights flickering like dying stars. A muffled scream pierced the silence, sharp and desperate, then choked off. Something heavy hit the water, shattering the surface. Bubbles spiraled upward as a glint of metal sank into the abyss a wedding ring, catching the faint glow of the ship above. Etched on its inner band, Daniel and Lorraine, the 14th of October, 1973. It vanished into the deep, swallowed by the dark. No explanation, no warning. Just the weight of the sea claiming its prize. 4 days earlier, the port of Miami buzzed with neon and noise. It was the 5th of March, 1981, and the MS Ocean Gala, a 600-foot leviathan of luxury, was boarding for a 7-day Caribbean cruise. Palm trees swayed along South Beach, and the air smelled of sunscreen and diesel. Radios blared disco hits Donna Summer, Maybe, or the Bee Gees, while passengers in polyester shirts and wide-brimmed hats hauled suitcases up the gangway. Reagan was in the White House, the Cold War was simmering, and cruises were the new badge of middle-class swagger. For Daniel and Lorraine Whitaker, both 32, this was supposed to be their first vacation in 3 years. A chance to escape the grind of Fort Lauderdale, where they lived in a modest bungalow with a sagging porch and a stack of unpaid bills. Daniel was a quiet guy, the kind who'd rather fix a radio than make small talk. He'd been a security technician for a defense contractor in the 70s, wiring alarm systems and debugging offices, but he quit after a job went south. Friends called him bookish, with wire-rimmed glasses and a habit of chewing his thumbnail when nervous. Lorraine was sharper, a former investigative reporter for a small-time Miami paper, until budget cuts killed her beat. She had a knack for sniffing out lies, green eyes that missed nothing, and a laugh that could light up a room. They'd been married since '73, no kids, no enemies, just a quiet life. But lately, Lorraine had been edgy, telling her sister Emily something was off with Daniel. He'd been taking late-night calls, scribbling in a black notebook he wouldn't let her see. When she pressed, he'd just say, "It's nothing, Lori, trust me." Now, standing on the sun deck of the Ocean Gala, Lorraine sipped a rum and coke, her sundress fluttering in the warm breeze. The ship was a floating palace, 5 decks, a casino, a ballroom with chandeliers, and a pool that sparkled like a sapphire. But something felt wrong. The air was too still, the hum of the engines too loud, like a heartbeat under the floor. Daniel leaned against the railing, staring at the horizon, his knuckles white. Lorraine nudged him, trying to break the tension. "Dan, you gonna loosen up, or what?" she said, her voice light but her eyes sharp. "This is supposed to be fun. You know, Mai Tai, steel drums, the whole deal." He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, Lori, fun. Just taking it all in." He glanced over her shoulder, scanning the deck. A group of retirees played shuffleboard. A kid in a Superman t-shirt chased a beach ball, but Daniel's gaze locked on a man in a black suit, standing alone by the bar. The guy was out of place, too stiff, too sober, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the evening haze. Lorraine followed his stare. "Who's that?" she asked, her reporter's instinct kicking in. "You know him?" "Nobody," Daniel said too fast, turning away. "Just some guy." "Bull," she whispered, stepping closer. "You've been jumpy since we boarded. And don't lie to me, Dan. I saw you talking to him last night by the lifeboats. What's going on?" Daniel's jaw tightened, his thumbnail digging into his palm. "Lori, drop it. Please. It's not your business." "Not my business?" Her voice rose, drawing a glance from a passing waiter. "We're married, Dan. If you're in some kind of trouble, I deserve to know." He grabbed her arm, gentle but firm, and pulled her toward the railing, away from the crowd. "Listen," he hissed, his voice low. "This trip, it's not what you think. I can't explain now, but you gotta trust me. Don't ask questions. Not here." Her eyes narrowed, hurt flashing across her face. "Trust you? You're scaring me, Dan. What the hell have you gotten us into? Before he could answer, a voice cut through the chatter. Evening, folks. The ship's captain, a barrel-chested man with a fake tan and a polyester tux, stood on a makeshift stage, microphone in hand. Welcome to the captain's gala. Tonight, we dine, we dance, and we celebrate the good life. The crowd cheered, but Lorraine barely heard. Her gaze flicked back to the man in the suit, who was gone, vanished like smoke. The ballroom was a swirl of sequins and cigarette haze. Chandeliers cast golden light over linen-draped tables, and a live band played Celebration by Kool and the Gang. Daniel and Lorraine sat at a table for two, picking at their shrimp cocktail. Lorraine tried to keep things light, joking about the tacky decor. Who puts gold wallpaper in a dining room? But Daniel was distracted, his eyes darting to the exits. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, pretending to adjust his tie. Dan, she said softly, talk to me. Whatever it is, we can handle it, together. He looked at her, his face softening for a moment, but then the band struck up a slow song, and the captain's voice boomed again. Time to hit the dance floor, ladies and gents. Couples shuffled onto the parquet, and Daniel stood, offering his hand. Come on, Lori, one dance. For old time's sake. She hesitated, then took his hand, her fingers cold against his. They swayed to the music, her head on his shoulder, but the moment felt fragile, like glass about to crack. The lights dimmed, and Lorraine shivered, a chill running down her spine despite the Caribbean heat. She glanced up and froze. The man in the suit was back, standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching them. His smile was thin, predatory, like a shark circling prey. Dan, she whispered, her voice trembling. He's here, that guy. He's staring at us. Daniel's grip tightened, but he didn't look. Don't make a scene, Lori. Just keep dancing. Screw that, she snapped, pulling back. Who is he? What's he want? Before Daniel could answer, an older woman in a flowing caftan approached, her silver hair glowing under the lights. She was Evelyn Harper, a retired librarian who'd introduced herself at the buffet as a spiritual traveler. Her eyes were wide, almost feverish, as she grabbed Lorraine's arm. Dear, Evelyn said, her voice low and urgent, you're in danger, both of you. I saw it last night, in the mirror of my cabin, a shadow, following you. It's not human. Lorraine blinked, caught off guard. What? Lady, I don't. Listen, Evelyn hissed, glancing at the man in the suit. This ship isn't safe. There's something below deck. Something wrong. I heard it, scratching, like claws on metal. It's tied to you two. Daniel stepped between them, his face hard. That's enough, ma'am. You're scaring my wife. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. You know, don't you, young man? You know what's down there. She slipped a crumpled note into Lorraine's hand and vanished into the crowd. Lorraine unfolded the note, her hands shaking. Scrawled in shaky cursive, don't ask about the container. She showed it to Daniel, but he crumpled it and shoved it in his pocket, his face pale. Dan, what container? She demanded, her voice rising. What the hell is going on? Not here, he muttered, pulling her toward the exit. The ballroom felt suffocating now, the music too loud, the laughter too forced. As they passed the man in the suit, he tipped his head, his smile chilling. Lorraine's heart pounded, her reporter's guts screaming that they were being hunted. Back in their cabin number 423, a cramped room with a double bed and a tiny balcony, Lorraine locked the door and rounded on Daniel. The space smelled of salt and mildew, and the hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the walls. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Start talking, she said, crossing her arms. Now. Daniel paced, running a hand through his hair. Lori, I can't. It's complicated. Complicated? She snapped. You're sneaking around with some creep in a suit, carrying a notebook you won't let me see, and now some psychic grandma's warning me about shadows? I'm not an idiot, Dan. You're in deep, and you dragged me into it. He stopped, his shoulders slumping. I didn't want you here, he said quietly. This was supposed to be me alone. But you insisted, and I couldn't say no. Her eyes widened, hurt cutting through her anger. What? You didn't want me on our vacation? It's not a vacation, he shouted, then caught himself, lowering his voice. It's a job. A one-time thing. I was supposed to deliver something in Nassau. Then we'd be done. Paid off. Free. Deliver what? She pressed, stepping closer. Drugs? Money? He shook his head, his eyes haunted. It's bigger than that. I can't tell you, Lori. If you know, they'll come for you too. Who's they? She demanded, grabbing his shirt. The guy in the suit? The captain. Who? Before he could answer, a sharp knock rattled the door. Lorraine froze, her pulse hammering. Daniel motioned for her to stay quiet and cracked the door open. It was Miguel Ramos, a young waiter with nervous eyes and a tray of coffee they hadn't ordered. Compliments of the captain, Miguel said, his voice shaky. He leaned in, whispering, I saw you last night, sir. By the cargo hold. With that guy. Be careful, they're watching. Daniel slammed the door, his face ashen. Lorraine grabbed the notebook from his jacket pocket while he was distracted, flipping it open. A single line in his neat handwriting, 739A, Nassau, handoff. Below it, a sketch of a metal box, the size of a coffin, with a code, AET protocol. Daniel, she said, her voice trembling, what's 739A? He snatched the notebook back, his hands shaking. You don't get it, Lori. You're digging your own grave. Then tell me, she shouted, or I'm walking out there and asking that creep in the suit myself. He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes desperate. Listen to me. There's a container in the cargo hold. It's important, government stuff. I was supposed to make sure it gets to Nassau, no questions asked. But something's wrong. They don't trust me anymore. Who's they? She whispered, her throat dry. He opened his mouth, but a low, rhythmic tapping interrupted. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, SOS. It was coming from the door. Lorraine's blood ran cold. Daniel pushed her toward the balcony, his voice a harsh whisper. Stay here. Don't move. He opened the door, but no one was there. A folded piece of paper lay on the floor. Lorraine picked it up, her fingers numb. In red ink, stop asking about the container. She dropped it, her breath hitching. Dan, she said, turning, but he was already gone, the cabin door swinging open. She ran to the hallway, her sandals slapping the carpet. The lights flickered, and the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. She reached the sun deck, the ocean stretching black and endless below. Daniel stood at the railing, talking to the man in the suit, their voices low and urgent. Dan, she called, her voice breaking. He turned, his face a mask of fear. Run, Lori, he shouted, but the man in the suit grabbed his arm. Footsteps thundered behind her, heavy and fast. She spun, but the deck was empty, the shadows twisting like claws. A hand clamped over her mouth, and the world went dark. The next morning, the 9th of March, 1981, the sun rose over a calm sea, but cabin 423 was a tomb. The bed was untouched, the pillows pristine. The balcony door hung open, sea wind whipping the curtains like pale ghosts. Clothes hung neatly in the closet. Lorraine's handbag sat on a chair, and Daniel's wallet empty of cash lay on the dresser. Passports were tucked in a drawer, untouched. A steward, Luis Ramos, stood frozen, his breakfast tray shaking in his hands. The only sign of life was a faint carving on the wooden desk, scratched with a knife. They know. The ship's crew searched every inch decks, engine rooms, kitchens, storage. Nothing. The Ocean Gala held its course for 6 extra hours while the Coast Guard was called. No one saw Daniel or Lorraine after the gala. The ship's CCTV, a clunky system of grainy tapes, showed them walking hand in hand down a hallway at 11:08 p.m., heading for the sun deck. Then, nothing. They were gone, swallowed by the night. In Fort Lauderdale, Lorraine's sister Emily would later tell a reporter, Lori didn't fall, she was scared before they left. She said Dan was in deep, that this trip wasn't what it seemed. But that quote never made the papers. The reporter died in a car crash 2 months later. Secrets, it turns out, don't just hide, they hunt. The MS Ocean Gala rocked gently on the Caribbean Sea, its decks gleaming under a brutal morning sun. It was the 9th of March, 1981, just hours after Daniel and Lorraine Whitaker vanished from cabin 423. The ship's crew swarmed like ants, their faces tight with forced calm. Passengers whispered over their Bloody Marys, trading rumors. They fell overboard. They were drunk. They're hiding in a lifeboat. But the truth was colder, heavier, like the 600-foot hull slicing through the waves. The ballroom, still littered with confetti from the captain's gala, felt like a crime scene nobody wanted to name. Miguel Ramos, a 20-year-old waiter with a nervous tic and a mop of black curls, stood in the crew mess, clutching a tray of dirty coffee cups. His hand shook, rattling the porcelain. Last night, he'd seen Daniel Whitaker arguing with a man near the cargo hold, a guy in a black suit, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, voice low and sharp. Miguel hadn't caught the words, but the air had felt wrong, like the moment before a fist fight. Now, Daniel and Lorraine were gone, and Miguel's gut churned with a fear he couldn't shake. "Yo, Miguel, you okay?" asked Carla, a bartender with a Jersey accent and a cigarette tucked behind her ear. She was wiping down a counter, her eyes flicking to the crew buzzing around them. Miguel swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I heard something last night, Carla. Down in the hold. A scream, like someone was, I don't know, being dragged." Carla snorted, but her smile was uneasy. "You're imagining things, kid. This ship's clean. People fall off, get drunk, whatever. Don't make it a ghost story." "It wasn't my imagination," Miguel hissed, leaning closer. "I saw that guy, the one in the suit. He was with Whitaker, and now they're gone, and nobody's saying squat." Carla's eyes narrowed. "Keep that to yourself, Miguel. You want to keep this job? Don't go poking around. This ship's got eyes." Before he could argue, the ship's first officer, a beefy guy named Hargrove, with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, stormed into the mess. "Ramos," he barked. "Captain wants you in his office, now." Miguel's stomach dropped. He set the tray down, hands trembling, and followed Hargrove through the ship's maze of corridors. The Ocean Gala was a floating city, 5 decks, 800 passengers, miles of pipe and wire, but it felt smaller now, claustrophobic, like the walls were closing in. The air smelled of salt and metal, and the hum of the engines buzzed like a warning. The captain's office was a cramped room behind the bridge, cluttered with charts and a rotary phone. Captain Delaney, a 50-something ex-Navy man with a fake tan and a polyester suit, sat behind a desk, puffing a cigar. His smile was all teeth, but his eyes were cold, like a shark's. "Sit, Ramos," Delaney said, pointing to a chair. "You were working the gala last night, yeah?" Miguel nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, sir." "See anything unusual?" Delaney leaned forward, his cigar smoke curling like a ghost. "Anything about the Whitakers?" Miguel hesitated. He could still hear that scream, faint but raw, echoing from the cargo hold. He could see the man in the suit, his smile sharp as a blade. But Carla's warning rang in his head. "This ship's got eyes." "No, sir," he lied, staring at his shoes. "Just serve their drinks. They seemed fine." Delaney studied him, then leaned back, exhaling smoke. "Good. Keep it that way. We're holding course for 6 hours while the Coast Guard pokes around. No need for stories, got it? People talk. Ramos, don't be one of them." Miguel nodded, his heart pounding. As he stood to leave, Delaney added, "One more thing. You ever go near the cargo hold again, you're off the ship, understand?" "Yes, sir," Miguel mumbled, but his mind raced. The cargo hold. That's where he'd seen Daniel and the man in the suit. That's where the scream had come from. And now the captain was warning him off, like he knew something. Back in the corridor, Miguel's hand shook so bad he had to lean against the wall. The ship's PA system crackled, announcing a delay in the itinerary, but all he could hear was that scream, looping in his head. He had to tell someone, but who? The crew was tight-lipped, the passengers clueless. And the man in the suit, he was still out there, watching. Across the country, in Fort Lauderdale, Emily Dawson sat in her kitchen, staring at a rotary phone that wouldn't ring. It was the 10th of March, a day after her sister Lorraine and brother-in-law Daniel vanished. Emily was 35, a nurse with a no-nonsense vibe and a smoker's rasp. Her bungalow was a mess, dishes in the sink, a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels on the counter, but her mind was sharp, piecing together fragments of Lorraine's last call. A week before the cruise, Lorraine had said, her voice tight, "Something's wrong. Dan's been different. He's got this notebook, keeps sneaking out at night, says it's work, but I don't buy it. This cruise isn't just a vacation." Emily had laughed it off, told her to relax, but now those words burned. She lit a cigarette, her hand shaking, and dialed the cruise line's office in Miami. The operator, a woman with a bored drawl, fed her the company line. "We're cooperating with authorities, ma'am. The Whitakers likely fell overboard. A tragic accident." "Accident? My ass," Emily snapped, slamming the receiver down. Lorraine didn't just fall. She was scared, had said so herself. And Daniel quiet. Nerdy Daniel was mixed up in something big. Emily grabbed her purse and drove to the Fort Lauderdale Sunday Sentinel, a local paper where a friend, Cal Fisher, worked as a reporter. Cal was a wiry guy in his 40s, with a comb-over and a nose for trouble. If anyone could dig up dirt, it was him. The newsroom smelled of ink and coffee, typewriters clacking like gunfire. Cal met Emily at his desk, littered with notepads and empty Coke cans. You look like hell," he said, pushing his glasses up. "What's this about Lorraine?" She handed him a letter, one Lorraine had mailed 2 days before the cruise. The envelope was creased, the handwriting rushed. "Read it," Emily said, her voice cracking. Cal scanned the letter, his brow furrowing. Lorraine's words were a gut punch. "Dan says if anything happens, I should run. There's people on this ship who aren't passengers. I don't know what he's into, but it's bad. If I don't come back, look for me." "Jesus," Cal muttered, setting the letter down. "This ain't no accident. Sounds like they got tangled in something heavy." "Like what?" Emily demanded, leaning forward. "Drugs? Smuggling?" Cal shook his head, tapping a pencil on his desk. "Maybe. But Atlantic Pearl Lines, the company running that ship, they've got a shady rep. I heard whispers they move more than passengers' diplomatic cargo, sensitive stuff, government contracts. If Daniel was carrying something, could be he stepped on the wrong toes." Emily's eyes widened. "You think the government's involved?" "I don't think anything yet," Cal said, grabbing his notepad. "But I'm gonna make some calls. Got a guy, Joe Kessler, used to work crew on the Ocean Gala. He'll know something." Back on the ship, Miguel couldn't shake the captain's warning. His shift ended at 10 p.m., but instead of hitting the crew bunks, he slipped down to Deck C, where the cargo hold was. The corridor was dim, the overhead bulbs buzzing like dying flies. The air grew colder, heavier, as he neared the steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." His sneakers squeaked on the linoleum, and his breath hitched. He shouldn't be here. But that scream, he couldn't unhear it. He pressed his ear to the door, hard hammering. At first, nothing. Then, a faint, rhythmic scratching, like nails on metal. His skin prickled. He reached for the handle, but a shadow moved behind him, long and sharp. He spun, gasping, and there was the man in the suit, standing 10 feet away, his sunglasses reflecting the dim light like twin mirrors. "What did you see, kid?" the man asked, his voice smooth but laced with menace. He stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking. "Last night, by the hold, you were there, weren't you?" Miguel backed up, his shoulder hitting the door. I didn't see nothing, sir. Just doing my rounds." The man smiled, thin and cruel. "Good. Keep it that way. Curiosity's a killer on a ship like this." He turned, vanishing into the shadows, but his words hung like a noose. Miguel bolted, his sneakers pounding the corridor, not stopping until he reached the crew mess. He sank into a chair, hands shaking, and swore he'd never go near the hold again. but the scratching sound followed him, clawing at his dreams. In Fort Lauderdale, Cal Fisher spent a week chasing leads. He met Joe Kessler at a dive bar off a 1A, a place with neon signs and a jukebox playing Springsteen. Joe was a former deckhand, 50s, grizzled, with a limp from a bad fall on the Ocean Gala in '79. He nursed a Budweiser, his eyes darting to the door. "Atlantic Pearl's dirty," Joe said, his voice low. "They move cargo nobody talks about. Diplomatic stuff, sealed containers." March '81, they had one code 739L, size of a damn coffin, loaded in Nassau. 2 guys guarded it, not crew. Suits, like feds or worse. Cal scribbled in his notepad, his pulse quickening. What was in it? Joe shrugged, but his hands shook. "Dunno. Smelled weird, like metal and blood." Night the Whitakers vanished. That container was supposed to go to St. Thomas, but it never made it. Logged as missing in transit. Bullshit. Someone took it. Cal leaned forward. "You think Daniel was involved?" Joe's eyes darkened. "I saw him, night 4, near the hold, talking to one of those suits. Looked scared shitless. Next morning, him and his wife are gone. You tell me." Cal drove home that night, his mind racing. The Ocean Gala wasn't just a cruise ship, it was a front, moving secrets for someone with deep pockets and deeper shadows. He called Emily, his voice urgent. I'm onto something. That container, 739A, it's the key. I'm gonna break this story wide open." "Be careful, Cal," Emily said, her voice tight. "Lorraine said people were watching. If they got her, they'll get you." "I'm not scared of a few suits," Cal said, but his bravado felt thin. He hung up, grabbed a Coke from the fridge, and started typing his story. The words flowed: cruise line cover-up, missing couple, government cargo, but a noise outside stopped him cold. A low rumble, like an engine idling. He peered through the blinds and saw a black SUV parked across the street, its headlights off. The driver's face was a shadow, but Cal swore he saw a glint, like sunglasses catching the streetlight. He backed away, heart pounding, and grabbed his car keys. He'd finished the story at the newsroom, where it was safe. The SUV's engine roared to life as he pulled out of his driveway, its headlights blinding in his rear view. He floored the gas, the needle hitting 60 on the empty road, but the SUV stayed close, its grille looming like a predator. The road curved, tires squealing, and Cal's hands shook on the wheel. Come on, he muttered, but the SUV swerved, clipping his bumper. His car spun, the world blurring, and the last thing he saw was a ditch rushing up to meet him. Emily got the call 2 days later, the 18th of March. Cal Fisher, dead in a crash. Single vehicle, no witnesses, ruled an accident. She didn't buy it. She sat in her kitchen, staring at Lorraine's letter, the words blurring through tears. "If I don't come back, look for me." She'd failed her sister, let Cal walk into a trap, but she wasn't done. She'd keep digging, no matter who was watching. A week later, a package arrived at her door. No return address, no postmark. Inside was a cassette tape, unlabeled, wrapped in brown paper. Emily's hands shook as she slid it into her old boombox. Static crackled, then a voice, Lorraine's, raw and panicked, like she was running. I was wrong. Dan's not who I thought. It's bigger than us, bigger than." A scream cut her off, sharp and final, then silence. The tape hissed, and Emily sat frozen, her cigarette burning to ash. "Who sent this?" she whispered, but the empty house had no answers. Outside, a black SUV rolled slowly past, its windows dark. Emily's breath caught, and she knew the truth wasn't just out there, it was hunting her. The Florida sun beat down on Key West, a sleepy island town where tourists in flip-flops shuffled past bars blasting Jimmy Buffett. It was June 1996, 15 years since Daniel and Lorraine Whitaker vanished from the MS Ocean Gala. The world had moved on, Reagan was gone, the Cold War was history, and cruise ships were bigger, flashier, packed with water slides and all-you-can-eat buffets. But for Helen Moore, a 40-year-old maritime researcher with a stubborn streak and a cluttered office, the Whitaker case was a ghost that wouldn't stay buried. Helen's office was a shoebox in a strip mall, wedged between a dive shop and a taco stand. The air conditioner rattled, and stacks of yellowed files teetered on her desk, spilling onto the floor. She was halfway through a lukewarm Coke, her glasses slipping down her nose, when she found it, a misfiled ledger from Atlantic Pearl Lines, tucked in a box of shipping records from a defunct Florida registry. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but one entry stopped her cold container 739A. Listed on the Ocean Gala's March 1981 voyage, marked in red, removed mid-route due to incident. Gotcha, Helen muttered, her pulse quickening. She'd been chasing maritime mysteries for a decade, writing a book on unsolved case of shipwrecks, vanishings, cover-ups. The Whitakers were her white whale, a story that gnawed at her. Everyone said they fell overboard, a drunken accident, but Helen didn't buy it. The ledger was proof. Something was on that ship, something worth hiding. She grabbed her rotary phone and dialed Emily Dawson, Lorraine's sister, now living in a Tampa trailer park. Emily was 50, her voice rough from years of smoking, her hope worn thin. "What do you want more?" Emily said, the line crackling. "I told you last year, I'm done with this." "I found something," Helen said, leaning forward. "A ledger from Atlantic Pearl. It mentions a container, 739A, taken off the ship during the Whitaker's cruise. It's not in any official report." "They lied, Emily. Lorraine didn't just fall." Emily was quiet, the only sound her uneven breathing. "You don't get it, Helen," she said finally. "They don't just lie, they kill. Cal Fisher, the reporter I hired in '81, dead. Car crash, 2 months after he started digging. You keep this up, you're next." "I'm not scared," Helen lied, her hand tightening on the receiver. "I'm doing this for Lorraine. For you. Meet me in Miami tomorrow. I need to know what she told you before she left." Emily sighed, a sound heavy with defeat. "Fine. But you're stirring up a hornet's nest, lady. Don't say I didn't warn you." Miami was a neon jungle, its skyline sharp against a hazy sky. Helen and Emily met at a diner off Biscayne Boulevard, a greasy spoon with checkered floors and a jukebox playing Fleetwood Mac. Emily looked older than her years, her hair gray, her eyes sunken. She slid into the booth, clutching a manila envelope, and lit a cigarette before speaking. "Here," she said, pushing the envelope across the table. "Lorraine's last letter, sent 3 days before the cruise. I didn't show it to the cops. Didn't trust them." Helen opened the envelope, her fingers brushing the crease paper. Lorraine's handwriting was tight, urgent, Dan's in deep. "He's carrying a notebook, says it's work, but I saw a name 739A. He's meeting someone in Nassau. This trip's a cover. If I don't make it back, don't let them bury me." Helen's throat tightened. 739A, she said, tapping the letter. "Same as the ledger." "What was Daniel doing, Emily? Was he smuggling?" Emily exhaled smoke, her eyes distant. "I don't know. Lorraine said he'd changed, started taking calls at 2 a.m., locking his desk. She thought it was an affair at first, but then she found that notebook. Said it had codes, maps, stuff about a handoff. She was scared, Helen. Not just for her, for Dan." Helen scribbled notes, her mind racing. "The ledger says the container was removed mid-route. That means someone took it off the ship, maybe in San Juan or St. Thomas. If Daniel was involved, he could have been a courier, moving something for the government." Emily's laugh was bitter. "Government? You think the feds give a damn about people like us? If Dan was working for them, they chewed him up and spit him out. Just like they did Lorraine." Helen leaned forward, her voice low. "Emily, I found something else. A customs report from San Juan, dated the 9th of March, 1981, the day the Ocean Gala docked in St. Thomas. It logs a container, same code, 739A, arriving and leaving the same day, signed by Daniel Whitaker, except he was already missing." Emily's cigarette froze halfway to her mouth. "That's impossible. They said Dan and Lorraine vanished the night before." Exactly, Helen said, sliding a photocopy of the report across the table. Someone faked his signature. Or he was alive longer than they told us. Emily stared at the paper, her hands shaking. You're saying they didn't die that night? They were taken? I don't know yet, Helen admitted. But I'm not stopping until I do. Helen spent weeks chasing the container's trail. She dug through archives, bribed a retired port clerk for access to old logs, and found a second clue, a passenger's journal from the 1981 cruise, written by Evelyn Harper, the eccentric woman who'd warned Lorraine at the gala. The journal, donated to a maritime museum in Key West, was a mix of poetry and paranoia. But one entry stood out, dated the 8th of March, 1981. The ship hums with secrets. Last night, I saw lights in the cargo hold, green and cold, like a willow, the wisp. Men in suits stood by a metal box, chanting numbers 739A. It felt wrong, like a ritual. The woman in 423, she knows. I saw fear in her eyes. Helen's skin prickled. Evelyn wasn't just a nutcase, she'd seen something real. The journal mentioned a scratching from the hold, like claws begging to be free. Helen tracked down Evelyn's last address, a nursing home in Orlando, but the staff said she died in 1989, raving about ghosts on the water. Her belongings were gone, except for a single Polaroid. Slipped into the museum's file, Evelyn on the Ocean Gala's deck, smiling, with the ship's railing behind her. Scrawled on the back, they're watching her. Helen needed more. She called a contact, Marco Ellison, a former Navy diver who'd worked salvage ops in the Caribbean. Marco was 55, a grizzled bear of a man with a limp and a whiskey habit, living in a trailer near Key Largo. They met at a bar on the docks, the air thick with salt and fish. Marco nursed a Budweiser, his eyes wary. You're digging into the Whitaker thing, he said, his voice rough. Bad idea, more. That case is cursed. Tell me about the container, Helen said, sliding a $50 bill across the table. You were on the Recovery in 2000, right? Off the Virgin Islands? Marco glanced around, then leaned in, his breath sour. Yeah, October 2000. Navy job, deep-sea sonar pinged something 850 feet down. We thought it was a wreck, but it was a container, metal, about 8 feet long, 4 feet wide. No serial number, just scratches on the side. Looked like it was placed there, not sunk. Upright, flat on the sand, like a damn coffin. Helen's pen froze. Placed? Yep, Marco said, draining his beer. Didn't roll, didn't drift. Someone wanted it hidden but not broken. We pulled it up with a submersible. Outside was clean, except for some stains. Biological, they said. Blood, maybe. But inside... He trailed off, his eyes haunted. What was inside? Helen pressed, her heart pounding. Marco's voice dropped to a whisper. Wedding rings, 2 of them, corroded but readable. One said Daniel and Lorraine, the 14th of October, 1973. The other had, come back to me. There was a letter, too, in a sealed tube, handwritten, from Lorraine. Said, we were tricked. Exit protocol is a lie. Rest was junk burned papers, a busted radio transmitter, some microfilm labeled AET. Navy suit showed up, took everything to Key West, then Langley. Locked it down tight. Helen scribbled furiously, her mind reeling. Exit protocol? AET? What's that mean? Hell if I know, Marco said, signaling for another beer. But there was something else. The container. It had scratches inside, Helen. Deep, like someone tried to claw their way out. I've seen wrecks, bodies, you name it. That thing gave me nightmares. Felt like it was watching me. Helen's stomach twisted. You think they were alive in there? Marco didn't answer, just stared at his bottle. I'm telling you, drop this. I talked to a reporter once, guy named Fisher. He ended up dead. This ain't just a story, it's a grave. The Recovery in 2000 was a blur of secrecy. Helen pieced it together from declassified Navy memos, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. On the 12th of October, a sonar operator off St. Thomas had picked up a metallic echo, 850 feet below. The container was hauled up, its surface pitted, but intact. No markings except faint scratches LWDW. No exit. Inside, the rings and letter were cataloged, along with fragments of a State Department document dated February 1981, mentioning a secure transfer to Nassau. The microfilm, labeled 739 AAT protocol, was flown to Langley within 48 hours, and the container was classified as an unidentified submerged object, non-hostile. But Marco's words stuck with Helen, scratches inside. She drove to Tampa to show Emily the findings, her beat-up Honda rattling on I-75. Emily met her at the trailer park, a cigarette dangling from her lips. The air smelled of swamp and gasoline, and a radio blared Garth Brooks from a neighbor's porch. "Read this," Helen said, handing over a folder with the Navy memos and a copy of Lorraine's letter. "The container had their rings, Emily, and a message from Lorraine. They didn't drown. They were put there." Emily's hand shook as she read, her eyes filling. "My God," she whispered. "They locked them in that thing? Alive?" "I don't know," Helen said, her voice steady but her gut churning. "But the signature in San Juan, the container's disappearance, the cover, up it's all connected. Atlantic Pearl lied. The government lied. We're close, Emily. I'm going to publish this. Blow it wide open." Emily grabbed her arm, her nails digging in. "You don't get it, Helen. Cal Fisher thought he could blow it open too. Look what happened. You publish, you're dead. They don't play games." "I'm not backing down," Helen said, pulling free. "Lorraine deserves the truth. So does Daniel." Emily's face crumpled, but she nodded. "Then be careful. If they got my sister, they'll get you. And they're closer than you think." Helen drove back to Key West that night, her headlights cutting through the dark. She couldn't shake Emily's warning, or Marco's haunted eyes. The container wasn't just a clue, it was a tomb, holding secrets someone would kill to keep. She stopped at a gas station, the neon sign buzzing like a warning. As she filled her tank, a payphone rang across the lot, shrill and insistent. She froze, her breath catching. Nobody else was around, just the hum of crickets and the distant roar of the ocean. She walked to the phone, her sneakers crunching on gravel, and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" A voice, low and mechanical, crackled through. "Stop digging more, or you'll sink like they did." "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The line went dead. She spun, scanning the lot. A black SUV idled 50 yards away, its headlights off, its engine a low growl. The driver's face was a shadow, but she swore she saw a glint sunglasses, catching the neon glow. Her heart hammered as she ran to her car, peeling out onto the highway. The SUV didn't follow, but its presence lingered, a predator waiting for its moment. Back in her office, Helen locked the door and poured a shot of bourbon, her hands trembling. The ledger, the letter, the rings, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was still blurry. Container 739A was the key, tied to something called AET protocol, something worth killing for. She opened her notebook, scribbling a single question. What did Lorraine know that got her buried alive? Outside, the night was still, but Helen felt eyes on her, cold and unblinking, from the dark beyond the window. The Tampa sun was a merciless hammer, baking the trailer park where Emily Dawson had spent her final years. It was July 2004, and Anna Dawson, 25, stood in her aunt's cluttered attic, sorting through boxes after Emily's death from lung cancer. Anna was a freelance journalist, scrappy and stubborn, with her mother's green eyes and a chip on her shoulder. She'd grown up hearing whispers about her Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Daniel, the couple who fell off a cruise ship in 1981. Emily never bought the official story, and neither did Anna. Now, with Emily gone, Anna was determined to find the truth. The attic smelled of mildew and old paper, the air thick with dust. Anna pried open a metal lockbox, buried under quilts and Christmas lights. Inside was a journal, its leather cover cracked, filled with Emily's jagged handwriting. The entries were a timeline of obsession dates, names, theories about Lorraine's disappearance. Tucked between the pages was a Polaroid of Lorraine and Daniel, smiling on a Fort Lauderdale beach, dated 1978. On the back, Emily had scrawled, "They didn't fall, they were taken." Anna's pulse quickened as she read. One entry, dated 1983, hit like a punch. "Lorraine mailed me a letter before the cruise. Said Dan was mixed up with something big, carrying a notebook with codes. She heard him talk about a container, 739A. I should have listened. I should have stopped her." Another page held a cassette tape, the one Emily received in 1981, with Lorraine's panicked voice, "It's bigger than us." Anna played it on an old boombox, her hands shaking as Lorraine's scream filled the attic, raw and final. "Jesus, Aunt Em," Anna whispered, wiping her eyes. "Why'd you keep this hidden?" She found Moria newspaper clipping about Cal Fisher, the reporter killed in a 1981 car crash, and a note from Helen Moore, the researcher who'd contacted Emily in 1996. Helen's note mentioned a container, 739A, pulled from the ocean in 2000, holding the Whitakers' wedding rings and a letter from Lorraine. Exit protocol is a lie. Anna's reporter instincts kicked in. This wasn't an accident, it was a cover-up, and Emily had died carrying its weight. Anna drove to Miami, her beat-up Toyota rattling on I-95. The city was a neon blur, its skyline glinting against a stormy sky. She tracked down Frank Teller, a retired CIA analyst who'd worked Caribbean ops in the 80s. Frank was 70, a wiry man with a buzz cut and a face like weathered leather, living in a condo overlooking South Beach. They met at a cafe, the air thick with espresso and salsa music. "Operation Blue Harvest," Anna said, cutting to the chase. She slid a copy of Helen's notes across the table. "What was it? And what's it got to do with my aunt and uncle?" Frank's eyes narrowed, his coffee untouched. "You're Emily's kid, huh? She was a pain in the ass, too. Look, Blue Harvest was a Cold War op, early 80s. CIA, NATO, private contractors. Moved sensitive tech and documents through civilian routes, cruise ships, freighters to dodge Soviet satellites. Low-profile folks like your uncle were perfect couriers, disposable." Anna's stomach twisted. "You're saying Daniel was a spy?" "Not a spy," Frank said, leaning back. "A tool. Guy like him, clean record, tech background was ideal. He carried sealed cargo, no questions asked. But Lorraine, she was a problem. Too smart, too nosy. She wasn't supposed to be on that ship." Anna's hands clenched. "So what happened? They screw up, and you guys killed them?" Frank's laugh was dry, humorless. "You watch too many movies, kid. We don't just kill people, but if an asset goes rogue, or their wife starts asking questions, things get messy. Daniel was supposed to deliver a container, 739A, in Nassau. Something went wrong. Maybe he talked, maybe Lorraine did. Either way, they vanished, and so did the container. What was in it?" Anna pressed, her voice sharp. Frank shrugged, but his eyes were guarded. "Tech, probably. Encryption gear, maybe a prototype. AT Protocol was the code name. That's all I know. You want advice? Drop this. You're poking a bear that's still hungry." Anna leaned forward, her green eyes blazing. "That bear ate my family, Frank. I'm not dropping shit." He sighed, tossing a crumpled napkin on the table. "Then good luck, kid. You'll need it." Anna spent months chasing leads, her apartment a war zone of notes and coffee mugs. She found Helen Moore's book, Unsolved Seas, published in 1998, with a chapter on the Whitakers. Helen had stopped digging after threats in 1996, but her notes pointed to a Navy recovery in 2000, pulling container 739A from 850 feet of water. Anna contacted Rebecca Aris, a former NSA technician who'd worked with Helen. Now living in D.C., Rebecca was 35, paranoid, with a habit of checking her locks twice. They met in a Georgetown diner, the jukebox playing Springsteen. I cleaned an audio file for Helen in 2000, Rebecca said, her voice low, eyes darting to the door. A Navy tape from the 9th of March, 1981, 3:42 a.m., off St. Thomas. Picked up by a listening post. It's Lorraine, Anna. She's screaming, they know Dan. We gotta run. Then a scuffle, and nothing. Anna's heart pounded. You're saying she was alive after they disappeared? Rebecca nodded, sliding a USB drive across the table. Here's a copy. I got fired for keeping it. NSA didn't want it out. They said it was sensitive, but I heard her, Anna. She was terrified. Anna plugged the drive into her laptop, her hands trembling. Lorraine's voice crackled through her earbuds, raw and desperate. They know, Dan. It's not just us. A man's voice, Daniel's, shouted, don't. Then a thud, a scream, and static. Anna's eyes burned, but she forced herself to listen again. There was something else, faint, in the background, a low hum, like machinery, and a voice, cold and American, saying, she wasn't supposed to be here. Jesus, Anna whispered, yanking out the earbuds. Who's the other guy? Rebecca shook her head. No idea. But 3 days after I gave Helen the file, my clearance was revoked. Someone's still watching, Anna. Be careful. In 2009, Anna took a risk. The MS Ocean Gala had been sold for scrap, towed to a shipyard in Alang, India. She flew 8,000 miles, her savings drained, to see it one last time. The ship was a rusted corpse, its hull peeled open like a carcass. Anna bribed a guard to let her aboard, her sneakers crunching on broken glass. The air was thick with oil and decay, the corridors dark and warped. She found cabin 423, its door hanging off its hinges. The bed was gone, the balcony railing rusted through, but the desk remained, its surface scarred with that eerie carving. They know. Anna ran her fingers over the wood, her throat tight. I'm here, Aunt Lorraine, she whispered. I'm looking. She explored further, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. In the bathroom, a cracked mirror caught her reflection, and she froze, etched into the glass, faint but clear. She saw us. Her breath hitched, and for a split second, she swore she saw Lorraine's face in the mirror, pale and pleading, before it was just her own reflection again. She stumbled back, heart hammering. The ship wasn't just a wreck, it was a graveyard, holding secrets that clung like damp rot. She searched the cabin, finding a loose floorboard. Under it was a rusted key, small and heavy, with a tag, storage, Deck C. Her pulse raced. Deck C was the cargo hold, where container 739A had been kept. The hold was a cavern of shadows, its steel walls dripping with condensation. Anna's flashlight flickered, the beam catching twisted pipes and forgotten crates. She found a locked storage locker, the key fitting perfectly. Inside was a leather pouch, brittle with age, holding a single microfilm reel, labeled 739A, Blue Harvest. Her hand shook as she pocketed it, but a noise stopped Hera low, rhythmic scratching, like nails on metal, coming from deeper in the hold. Who's there? She called, her voice echoing. No answer, just the scratching, louder now, insistent. She backed away, her flashlight dying with a pop. The darkness closed in, thick and suffocating, and she ran, her sneakers pounding the rusted floor. She didn't stop until she was outside, gasping under the Indian sun, the microfilm burning a hole in her pocket. Back in Miami, Anna took the microfilm to a library with an old reader. The reel was damaged, but fragments were clear. A list of names, dates, and ports, labeled Operation Blue Harvest, civilian couriers. Daniel Whitaker's name was last, with a note. Asset compromised. Silence. Authorized. March 1981. Another frame mentioned AET protocol, describing it as a secure encryption transfer, non-military route. Anna's blood ran cold. Daniel wasn't just a courier, he'd been set up, and Lorraine had paid the price. She called Rebecca, her voice urgent. I found a microfilm, Beck. It's a list of couriers, Daniel included. Blue Harvest was real, and they killed him for it. Get rid of it, Rebecca said, her voice shaking. I'm serious, Anna. I got a call last week. No caller ID, telling me to stop talking. They're still out there. I'm not stopping, Anna said, hanging up. She hid the microfilm in a safe deposit box, but the fear followed her. At night, she'd hear noises, squeaks, taps, like someone testing her locks. She bought a .38 revolver, keeping it under her pillow, but sleep was a stranger. In 2011, a package arrived at her apartment, no return address. Inside was a typed note. You're close. Check Nassau, 1981, Bank of the Caribbean, Box 739. Anna flew to Nassau, her nerves frayed. The bank was a crumbling relic, its vault half abandoned. She bribed a clerk to check the records. Box 739 had been rented in 1981, under Daniel's name, paid for a decade. It was empty now, but the clerk found a receipt, dated the 10th of March, 1981, for a sealed package, removed by an unnamed party. Anna's heart sank. She was too late. But as she left the bank, a man stepped from an alley, his face half hidden by a baseball cap. He was tall, his suit black and crisp, his eyes shielded by sunglasses. Her hand went to her purse, gripping the revolver. You're Anna Dawson, he said, his voice smooth, American. You look like your aunt, same fire. Who the hell are you? She demanded, her finger on the trigger. He smiled, thin and sharp, like a blade. Someone who was there. You're close, Anna, but you're asking the wrong questions. Lorraine did, too. Want to know what it cost her? She backed away, her pulse roaring. Stay away from me. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing her. You're digging your own grave, just like she did. He pulled a knife, its blade glinting in the Nassau sun, and Anna's world narrowed to the pounding of her heart. She ran, dodging through the crowded market, the man's footsteps fading behind her. She didn't stop until she reached her hotel, locking the door and sinking to the floor, gasping. The microfilm, the tape, the key, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was a nightmare. And now the man in the suit was back, the same shadow that had hunted Lorraine. That night, alone in her room, Anna found a voicemail on her phone, left while she was at the bank. It was Rebecca, her voice a frantic whisper. Anna, I found another tape. It's Daniel, from the ship. He's saying he's sorry, that they had no choice. Call me. The message cut off with a crash, like glass shattering. Anna dialed Rebecca's number, but it went to voicemail. Her hand shook as she played the message again, Daniel's voice faint but clear. Lori, if you hear this, I'm sorry. They didn't give us a choice. The line crackled, and another voice broke through, cold and final. It's done. Anna dropped the phone, her breath hitching. The truth wasn't just a story, it was a death sentence, and she was next. Miami's neon pulse throbbed against a stormy sky, the summer of 2022 heavy with humidity and secrets. Anna Dawson, now 43, lived in a cramped apartment off Coral Way, her life a fortress of locked doors and loaded guns. The Whitakers' disappearance had consumed her for 18 years, ever since she found her Aunt Emily's journal in 2004. Lorraine and Daniel weren't just a cold case, they were her blood, her ghosts, and she'd burned the world down to find them. But the closer she got, the louder the shadows whispered, and the man in the black suit was never far behind. Anna's apartment was a war room, walls plastered with maps, photos, and red string connecting dots from 1981 to now. A grainy Polaroid of Lorraine and Daniel on a Fort Lauderdale beach sat on her desk, next to the microfilm she'd found in the Ocean Gala's wreckage in 2009. The reel listed Daniel as a courier for Operation Blue Harvest, a Cold War scheme to move tech through civilian ships. AET Protocol, the code name for the cargo in container 739A, was the key, but its meaning stayed maddeningly out of reach. Anna's .38 revolver lay within arm's reach, a cold comfort after the knife-wielding suit in Nassau a decade ago. Her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. shattering the silence. No caller ID. She grabbed it, her pulse spiking. "Who's this?" "Check your mailbox." A voice rasped, low and distorted, like it was run through a cheap modulator. "You're closer than you think." The line went dead. Anna slipped on sneakers, tucked the revolver in her waistband, and crept downstairs. The Miami night was thick, the air smelling of rain and asphalt. Her mailbox, a rusted box by the curb, held a padded envelope, no address, no stamp. She tore it open, her hands trembling. Inside was a faded photo. Daniel and Lorraine, older, grayer, sitting under a palm tree on a beach. They were smiling, his arm around her shoulder, a boat in the background. Scrawled on the back, Martinique, 1986. A note tucked in the envelope read, "They were taken, not lost." Buried in silence, but for a few years, they were together. Her breath caught. "No way," she whispered, staring at the photo. Lorraine's eyes, green like hers, seemed to plead through the grainy image. Was this real? Were they alive 5 years after the cruise? Or was it a fake? Another trap? She ran back upstairs, locking the door, and called Clara Renaire, a journalist she'd met in 2020 while pitching a story on the Whitakers. Clara answered on the third ring, her voice groggy. "Anna, it's 2 in the morning. What's up?" "I got a photo," Anna said, pacing. "Daniel and Lorraine, dated 1986, Martinique. They look alive, Clara. Is this legit, or are they screwing with me?" Clara's tone sharpened. "Hold up, 1986? That's 5 years after they vanished. Send me a scan. I'll run it through some software, check for tampering." Anna emailed the photo, her hands shaking. "There's more. The note says they were taken. I think it's tied to that container, 739A and AET protocol. I need your help, Clara. You've got contacts at the State Department." Clara hesitated, the silence heavy. "Anna, I've been digging too. I found a declassified British cable, 1981, mentioning AET protocol. It was a CIA op, testing encryption tech through civilian couriers. Daniel was one of them, but Lorraine wasn't cleared. She was an unintended variable. The cable says they neutralized a complication at sea. Sounds like a hit." Anna's stomach twisted. "Neutralized? You're saying they killed them?" "Not sure," Clara said, "but I've got a leaden audio file from the Ocean Gala's deck, night they disappeared. It's rough, but I'm cleaning it up. Lorraine's voice is on it, screaming, 'They're right behind us.' I'll send it when it's ready, but Anna, this is getting dangerous. I got a call yesterday, some Fed telling me to back off." "Same here," Anna said, glancing at the photo. "They're watching, Clara, but I'm not stopping. Send me that audio." The audio arrived 2 days later, a digital file Clara emailed with a warning. "Listen alone." Anna sat at her desk, the apartment dark except for her laptop's glow. The file was 17 seconds of chaos, wind howling, waves crashing, then Lorraine's voice, raw and panicked. "They're right behind us, Dan. Run." A scuffle, a muffled shout, "Daniels?" Then a scream, sharp and final. A man's voice, cold and American, cut through. She wasn't supposed to be here. The file ended in static, but Anna played it again, her heart hammering. The hum in the background, like machinery, matched the Navy tape Rebecca Arras had found in 2011. It wasn't just a ship, it was a trap. She called Clara, her voice urgent. "That audio, it's proof they were hunted. Who's the guy talking? A Fed? A spook?" "I don't know," Clara said, her voice tight. "But I'm meeting a source tomorrow, an ex-Navy guy who worked the 2000 recovery. He says the container had more than rings and a letter. I'll call you after." A crash cut her off, like glass shattering. "Clara?" Anna shouted. The line went dead. She redialed, but it went to voicemail. Her hands shook as she grabbed her keys, ready to drive to Clara's place, but a text stopped her. "Unknown number. Stop digging, or you're next." Attached was a photo of Clara's apartment, its window smashed, taken from the street. Anna's blood ran cold. She called the cops, But by the time they reached Clara's place, it was empty. No Clara. No signs of a struggle, just a broken window and a note on the counter. Leave it buried. Anna knew it wasn't a coincidence. The man in the suit, the shadows that killed Cal Fisher and scared Helen Moore, they were closing in. She went underground, renting a motel room in Homestead under a fake name. The motel was a dive, its neon sign flickering, the air smelling of cigarettes and despair. She spread her evidence on the bed, the microfilm, the Martinique photo, Lorraine's letter from 1981. The pieces were coming together, but the puzzle was a nightmare. Daniel had been a courier, carrying AET tech in container 739A. Lorraine, the uninvited wife, had seen too much, asked too many questions. But the photo, could they have survived, hidden away? Or was it a cruel fake, meant to lure her into a trap? Her burner phone buzzed, a call from an encrypted number. She answered, her revolver in hand. Who's this? It's Rebecca, a voice whispered, barely audible. I'm in hiding, Anna. They got Clara. I found something, a second container, found in 2022, near St. Thomas. Same type as 739A, unmarked, pulled up by a private crew. It was empty, except for one thing. What? Anna asked, her throat dry. A typewriter key, Rebecca said. The letter L, bolted to the wall, scratched underneath. She told the truth. Anna, it's Lorraine. She's leaving us clues, even now. Anna's skin prickled. Where's the container? Seized by the Navy, Rebecca said. Gone, like the first one. But I got a photo before they locked it down. I'm sending it. Anna, be careful. They're not just watching, they're hunting. The photo arrived seconds later. A rusted metal box, 8 feet long, its surface pitted with barnacles. The typewriter key was small, its L gleaming under a flashlight. The scratched words, she told the truth, were jagged, desperate, like a final cry. Anna touched the screen, her eyes burning. Aunt Lorraine, she whispered, what did you know? She felt it then, a chill that wasn't from the motel's shaky AC. She crossed to the window, peering through the blinds. A black SUV idled across the street, its headlights off, its engine a low growl. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. She grabbed her bag, stuffing the photo, microfilm, and revolver inside, and slipped out the back door, disappearing into the night. Anna needed answers, and Nassau was her last shot. Emily's journal had mentioned a bank box, 739, tied to Daniel in 1981. She flew to the Bahamas, her nerves frayed, and checked into a cheap hotel near Junkanoo Beach. The bank, a crumbling building with peeling paint, was her target. She bribed a clerk, a wiry kid named Jamal, with $200 to check the vault. He came back pale, his hands shaking. Box 739's been empty since '82, Jamal said, glancing over his shoulder. But there's a record. Someone took a package, the 10th of March, 1981, day after your people went missing. No name, just a signature, John Doe. And this. He handed her a yellowed receipt, its ink faded but legible, sealed container, transferred to private vessel. Anna's pulse raced. Private vessel? Where'd it go? Jamal shrugged. No clue. But the guy who signed, he came back in '86, paid to keep the box open another 10 years. Looked like a spook, my boss said. Suit, sunglasses, the works. The man in the suit. Anna's hand went to her revolver, her eyes scanning the bank's dusty lobby. Thanks, Jamal, she said, slipping him another $50. Keep this quiet. She left, her mind spinning. The container had moved the day after Daniel and Lorraine vanished, and the suit was tied to it, even years later. But the Martinique photo 1986 kept nagging her. If they were alive, where were they? And why was the container empty, except for Lorraine's cryptic message? Back at the hotel, Anna spread her evidence on the bed, the photo of Lorraine and Daniel staring up at her. She called Clara's number again, hoping against hope, but it was disconnected. Rebecca wasn't answering either. She was alone, and the shadows were closing in. At midnight, Her room's phone rang, a shrill sound that made her jump. She grabbed it, her revolver in her other hand. "Anna Dawson," a voice said, smooth and cold, the same American accent from the 1981 audio. "You're persistent, like your aunt. Too bad it's gonna cost you." "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear clawing her chest. "Someone who cleans up messes," he said. "You found the key, the microfilm, the photo. You're close, but you're blind. Stop now, or you'll end up like Clara." "Where's Clara?" Anna shouted. "What did you do to her?" He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "She's alive, for now. Want her to stay that way. Walk away." "Fuck you." Anna spat, slamming the phone down. Her hand shook, but she wasn't backing down. She grabbed her bag, ready to bolt, but a noise stopped her, a low thump, like a footstep, outside her door. She killed the lights, crouching by the bed, revolver aimed. The doorknob rattled, slow and deliberate, then stopped. A shadow passed under the door, and a piece of paper slid through the crack. She waited, heart pounding, until the footsteps faded. The paper was a torn notebook page, Daniel's handwriting. "Lori, if you hear this, I'm sorry. They didn't give us a choice." Below it, a new line, fresh ink, Nassau, Bank of the Caribbean, Vault 739, last chance. Anna's blood ran cold. It was a trap, but it was also a lead, the same box she'd just checked. She grabbed her bag and ran, hailing a cab to the bank. The streets were empty, the night thick with the threat of rain. She bribed Jamal again, her last $100, to open the vault after hours. He led her to box 739, his flashlight shaking. "It's empty," he said, but Anna wasn't listening. She ran her hands along the box's interior, her fingers catching on a loose panel. She pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a cassette tape, labeled St. Thomas, 3 divided by 9 divided by 81. Her hands trembled as she pocketed it, but Jamal's scream stopped her. "Someone's here," he hissed, pointing to the vault's entrance. A shadow moved, tall and sharp, the glint of sunglasses catching the flashlight. Anna shoved Jamal toward the back exit, her revolver drawn. "Run," she shouted, but the shadow was faster, his footsteps echoing like gunfire. She sprinted through the bank, dodging desks and chairs, and burst into the alley, the tape clutched tight. The man in the suit was gone, but his presence lingered, a noose tightening around her. Anna played the tape in her hotel room, her door barricaded with a chair. Daniel's voice crackled through, broken and desperate. "Lori, if you hear this, I'm sorry. They didn't give us a choice. The container, it's not what they said. I tried to stop it, but they..." A thud cut him off, followed by the same cold voice from the deck audio. "It's done." The tape ended, but Anna's mind raced. Daniel hadn't just been a courier, he'd tried to sabotage the op, and it cost them everything. She hid the tape in her bag, her eyes falling on the Martinique photo. The smiles, the palm tree, the boat, it felt too perfect, too staged. Was it a lie, or a glimpse of hope? She didn't know, but one thing was clear. The truth was a death sentence, and she was running out of time. The Nassau night was a humid shroud, wrapping Anna Dawson in sweat and fear. It was April 2023, and she stood in a deserted alley behind the Bank of the Caribbean, clutching the cassette tape she'd found in Vault Box 739. The tape held Daniel Whitaker's voice, a desperate confession from March 1981. "Lori, I'm sorry. They didn't give us a choice." The man in the black suit was out there, his shadow looming like a predator, but Anna was done running. She'd spent 18 years chasing the truth about her Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Daniel, and tonight, she'd face the monster head-on. Her .38 revolver was heavy in her waistband, a cold anchor as she slipped into a cab, heading for her hotel. The driver, an old man with a reggae tune humming on the radio, glanced at her in the rearview. "You okay, miss? Look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Anna muttered, her eyes scanning the dark streets. The tape burned in her pocket, Daniel's words looping in her head. He tried to sabotage the AET protocol, a CIA op to move encryption tech through civilian couriers like the MS. Ocean Gala. Lorraine, the uninvited wife, had seen too much, and they'd both paid the price. The Martinique photo from 1986, Daniel and Lorraine, older, smiling under a palm tree, haunted her. Were they alive, hidden away, or was it a fake, a cruel trick to keep her chasing shadows? Back at the hotel, Anna barricaded the door, her hand shaking as she played the tape again on a borrowed cassette player. Daniel's voice was faint, broken. The container, it's not what they said. I tried to stop it, but they, a thud, then a cold voice. It's done. She froze, her breath hitching. The second voice was the man in the suit, the same one who'd threatened her in 2011. He was the cleaner, the one who buried secrets in people. A knock rattled the door, sharp and deliberate. Anna grabbed her revolver, crouching behind the bed. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite the fear clawing her chest. "Room service," a man said, his tone too smooth, too familiar. She peered through the peephole. It was him, the man in the suit, sunglasses gone, his eyes cold and gray, like a storm over the ocean. He held a knife, its blade glinting under the hallway light. Anna's heart pounded, but she forced herself to think. She'd faced him before and survived. She cracked the door, keeping the chain on, her gun aimed through the gap. "What do you want?" He smiled, thin and predatory. "Anna Dawson, you're persistent, like Lorraine. I told you to stop, but here we are." "You killed them," she spat, her finger on the trigger. "Daniel and Lorraine. You buried them in that container." His smile widened, chilling her blood. "Buried? No, Anna. They were taken, not lost." Daniel was a problem. He tried to sell the AET tech to the Soviets. Lorraine was collateral damage. "We moved them to Martinique, kept them alive for a while. They were useful, until they weren't." Anna's grip tightened, the revolver shaking. "The photo 1986, that was them?" He laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "You think that was real?" "Those were actors, Anna. A decoy to throw off anyone sniffing around. Exit protocol was a myth, a story we fed to keep the curious quiet." Lorraine figured it out, started asking questions. She signed her own death warrant. "You bastard," Anna whispered, her eyes burning. "Where are they now?" "Gone," he said, stepping closer, his knife tapping the doorframe. "Martinique, 1987. They tried to run. We stopped them. You want to join them? Keep digging." Anna's finger twitched, but before she could shoot, he kicked the door, snapping the chain. She fired, the shot deafening, but he dodged, vanishing into the hallway. She ran after him, revolver raised, but the corridor was empty, his laughter echoing like a ghost. She sank to her knees, gasping, the tape still clutched in her hand. He'd confirmed that Lorraine and Daniel were dead, but not in 1981. They'd survived, caged in a secret prison, until the CIA tied up loose ends. Anna returned to Miami, her apartment, a fortress of locked doors and drawn blinds. She couldn't shake the man's words, or the photos' fake smiles. But the tape was real, and so was the microfilm from the Ocean Gala, listing Daniel as a compromised courier. She needed more proof, something to expose the conspiracy. She contacted a hacker, a 30-year-old named Leo who worked dark web forums, promising him $5,000 to dig into declassified archives. Leo called her a week later, his voice hushed over a burner phone. "Found something," he said. "British Foreign Office, 1981. A cable from the U.S. Embassy in Nassau, dated the 11th of March. Subject: complication at sea, civilian asset neutralized. Most of it's redacted, but it mentions AET protocol encryption tech, tested on civilian ships to dodge Soviet radar. Daniel Whitaker's name is there, marked as asset." Another line says, "Companion unintended variable, protocol required full silence." That's Lorraine, Anna. They killed her because she wasn't part of the plan. Anna's stomach churned. "Anything else?" "Yeah," Leo said, his voice shaking. A memo from Canadian Intelligence, 1982, references a Joint Eyes-Only Op, AET, Phase 3. Says the U.S. used the Ocean Gala to move a prototype crypto device. Whitaker was the courier, but he compromised the op. They ordered a cleanup. Anna, this goes deep CIA, NATO, maybe higher. I'm wiping my drives after this. You're on your own. No. She hung up, her mind racing. The AET protocol wasn't just tech, it was a death sentence for anyone who got too close. She pulled out the Martinique photo, staring at the faces. Actors, he'd said. But Lorraine's eyes, even staged, felt alive, pleading. Anna couldn't let it go. She needed one last piece, something to make it undeniable. She drove to Fort Lauderdale, to the Maritime Archive where the Ocean Gala's logbook had surfaced in 2023, found in a Belgian collector's stash. The archive was a dusty warehouse, smelling of old paper and sea salt. The curator, a frail man named Peter, led her to a glass case holding the logbook, its pages yellowed but intact. This is it, Peter said, his accent thick. Page 423 is unusual. Added later, in different ink. Anna's hand shook as she opened the book. Page 423, the Whitaker's cabin, was handwritten, dated weeks after the cruise ended. They were not lost. They were removed. She asked the wrong question. He gave the right answer. Now they sleep. Under infrared, a watermark glowed faintly. AT Phase 3 resolved. Her breath caught. It was proof the ship's crew knew, had documented the cover-up. But one line chilled her. She asked the wrong question. Lorraine's curiosity, her reporter's instinct, had killed her. Peter, Anna said, her voice low. Who else has seen this? He hesitated, glancing at the door. A man came last week. American, tall, wore sunglasses. Asked about the logbook, paid me to keep quiet. I didn't take the money. Anna's blood ran cold. The man in the suit. He was still hunting, tying up loose ends 42 years later. She photographed the page, her hand steady despite the fear. Thanks, Peter. Don't tell anyone I was here. Back in Miami, Anna decided to go public. She'd lost Clara, Rebecca was in hiding, and the man in the suit was closing in, but silence wasn't an option. She launched a podcast, Under the Black Water, uploading the first episode from a burner laptop in a coffee shop. The episode laid it all bare, the logbook, the microfilm, the tapes, the Martinique photo. She named Operation Blue Harvest, AET protocol, and the CIA's role in using civilians as pawns. My Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Daniel were erased, she said, her voice breaking. But the truth doesn't die. It's out there, in the water, waiting. The podcast went viral, racking up 100,000 downloads in a week. Listeners flooded her inbox with tips, but one email stopped her cold, sent from an encrypted server. You open Pandora's box. They're coming. Attached was a grainy video, 17 seconds long, showing the Ocean Gala's deck at night, the 8th of March, 1981. Lorraine ran across the frame, her face pale, shouting, "They're right behind us." A shadow followed, tall, suited, sunglasses glinting. The video cut to black, but a final frame flashed, a close-up of Lorraine's face, her eyes wide, with text overlaid. She told the truth. Anna's hand shook as she replayed it. The video was real, pulled from the ship's primitive CCTV, never released. Someone wanted her to have it, but who? A whistleblower? Or another trap? She called Leo, but his number was dead. She tried Rebecca voicemail. The coffee shop's windows reflected the street, and she saw it, a black SUV, parked 50 yards away, its engine idling. She grabbed her bag and ran, blending into Miami's crowds. She checked into a new motel, her last $200 securing a room with a broken television and a flickering neon sign. She locked the door, her revolver on the nightstand, and opened her laptop to draft the next episode. But a package slipped under her door. No sound, no shadow. She tore it open, her heart pounding. Inside was a gold bracelet, Lorraine's initials etched on it, and a note in Daniel's handwriting. Lori, I tried. If you're reading this, tell Anna, don't stop. Anna's eyes burned. The bracelet was real. She'd seen it in old photos, Lorraine's favorite. But the note was fresh, the ink still wet. How? She turned it over, finding a final line. Martinique, 1987. We were together. Her mind reeled. The man in the suit had said they died in 1987. But this note, this bracelet, it felt like Lorraine's voice, reaching through time. She drove to Fort Lauderdale Beach, where a memorial plaque for the Whitakers sat on a stone bench, placed by Emily years ago. The ocean stretched endless, its waves whispering secrets. Anna clutched the bracelet, her voice a whisper. I'm close, Aunt Lorraine. He won't stop. That night, she dreamed of the Ocean Gala, its corridors dark and endless. Lorraine stood in cabin 423, her face pale, pointing to the mirror. She saw us, the glass red, and Lorraine's voice echoed, Tell them, Anna, tell the world. She woke with a start, her phone buzzing. Another anonymous email, a photo of a boat, its hallmarked exit protocol, docked in Martinique, 1987. Lorraine stood on the shore, older, her eyes haunted but alive. A note was attached. She lived. They lied. Anna's heart raced. Was Lorraine alive, hidden under a new name? Or was this another decoy, like the 1986 photo? She uploaded the new evidence to her podcast, her voice steady but fierce. They want us to stop, to let the ocean keep its secrets. But Lorraine's out there, in the water, in the truth. I'm not giving up. As the episode went live, her motel room's phone rang. She answered, her revolver in hand. Who's this? A woman's voice, soft and trembling, like an echo from 1981. Anna, it's me. Don't stop. Lorraine? Anna gasped, but the line went dead. She ran to the window, peering into the night. A cruise ship glided past, its lights dancing on the water. On the deck, a woman stood, her silhouette familiar, her green eyes catching the moonlight. Anna blinked, and she was gone. She sank to the floor, the bracelet tight in her fist. The truth was out there, a flame that wouldn't die, but it came with a price. The man in the suit was still hunting, the CIA still watching. Anna whispered to the dark, I'll find you, Aunt Lorraine, I promise. The ocean roared, holding its secrets close, but Anna knew. The truth was rising, and nothing could bury it again. Message: the truth is a flame that never dies, no matter how deep the darkness tries to bury it.